As a youngster, I was captivated by the sci-fi horror B-movie Event Horizon. Now many of you folks may not have even seen it, or thought it was a great movie, and sure, it's not perfect. But the thing was, what captivated my imagination wasn't the plot of the movie itself, but the opening sequence. A spaceship appears in orbit around the planet Neptune, having taken part in a manned mission out to the 8th planet. Later in the film, another vessel, the Lewis and Clark, arrives, also manned. Hi everyone, Vega here, and in today's video we return to our solar system series to look into the reality of what it might take to make a manned mission out to the planet Neptune, and what would be a monumental achievement for humanity. So let's get to it. In 2022, a new image from the James Webb Space Telescope captured our 8th planet in all its glory. Here we can see 7 of Neptune's 14 known moons. Neptune's large and unusual moon Triton dominates this Webb portrait of Neptune as a very bright point of light sporting diffraction spikes. This incredible image is likely just the beginning for new imagery of the distant blue planet, some 30 times further from the Sun than planet Earth. Telescopes are of course amazing, but an actual journey to the blue world would at present take several decades, and this isn't even thinking about the significant advancements in technology it would require. Not only this, but we still don't really understand the effects of long-term space travel on the human body. Let's consider the duration of the journey. Neptune, as 8th planet from the Sun, is currently over 2.7 billion miles from Earth. Voyager 2, for example, travelled at 12 years at an average velocity of 19 kilometers a second, about 42,000 miles an hour to reach Neptune. Assuming we could recreate those timescales, a return trip would take around 25 years. Obviously, as things stand, it seems totally unpractical for a manned mission, as it would require the crew to live in a spacecraft for a substantial fraction of their entire adult lives, and those lives would likely also be shortened by the damage done to bodies by dangerous cosmic rays and space radiation. So, to shorten the duration of the journey, a more advanced propulsion system is going to be needed. One possible solution is the use of thermal nuclear propulsion, which could theoretically cut the travel time to return trip to around 15 years, which is better obviously, but realistically still incompatible with current lifespans. Another option is to use the laser propulsion system, which again theoretically could accelerate a small ship to fractions or even relative speeds of the speed of light. But many of those calculations are based on microchip-sized craft, not double-decker bus or larger behemoths. The power and sheer size of a sail required to accelerate such a large craft also would seem to rule it out for now. So, alternatively, and perhaps our best option, might be to use the radical new idea we discussed recently using differences in solar wind speeds to surf, or should I say accelerate our craft. But don't forget to check out that video if you haven't already. By deflecting particles of the solar wind, it's possible to generate thrust and force that's transferred to your spacecraft, and it also appears there is a way to get faster than the wind itself. It could potentially make a trip into months rather than years, but again most of the research is based around tiny chip-sized probes and not huge juggernauts like what would be required to support life and our crew. And as I said, these technologies are still in the early stages of development and would require significant research and funding to become viable options, which doesn't seem on the horizon anytime soon. Be that as it may, once the duration of the journey is addressed, the next challenge would be ensuring the survival of the crew during the extended trip. The effects of long-term space travel on the human body are not well known or understood, and the trip out to Neptune would likely result in significant physical and psychological challenges for the crew. These challenges can be mitigated, and our spacecraft would need to be equipped with advanced life support systems and medical facilities. These would include closed-loop systems for recycling air, water and waste, as well as a hydroponic garden to provide fresh food. Likewise, the crew would also need to exercise regularly to maintain muscle mass and bone mass, and they would also need to be monitored for signs of depression and other mental health issues. Additionally, spacecraft would need to be equipped with radiation shielding to protect the crew from the high levels of cosmic radiation present in deep space. As we mentioned, high energy particles in deep space can cause cancer and other health problems, as well as other unforeseen dangers, and perhaps most worrying of all, damage to the spacecraft's electronics. I'm sure nobody really wants to be sent out to Neptune on a ship with a broken paddle, so to speak. Any malfunction in the craft's electronics could mean missing the planet entirely, or heading off for eternity into the void. Not something that's a very comforting thought, I'm sure you'll agree. So it's likely a combination of materials and other methods would be needed to protect the crew from these harmful radiations. Theoretically, engineers could use materials such as water, polyethylene or aluminium to create a radiation shield around the spacecraft. This shield could block most of the harmful radiation and protect the crew from its effects, but again it's a balancing act between adding extra weight to a craft and safety features. The solar wind's charged particles ejected from the sun's corona can also damage electronics and disrupt communication systems, although these are perhaps easy to mitigate, and perhaps the best way to protect a spacecraft from solar wind is to use a combination of shielding and active monitoring. Engineers could create shields that face the sun, blocking the charged particles from reaching the spacecraft, while also installing vital instruments that can detect any changes in solar activity. The dangers don't end there though. Other space dangers can threaten spaceships, like micrometeoroids, space debris and extreme temperatures. Micrometeoroids and space debris could damage the spacecraft's outer layer. Not only this, but extreme temperatures can also be a problem, and spacecraft can experience both extreme heat and extreme cold. Engineers could perhaps use materials such as reinforced carbon-bonded ceramics and heat-resistant polymers to protect the spacecraft from these hazards. So we've talked about some of the bad sides of our trip, but let's also consider the sights that the crew might encounter along the way. A trip to Neptune would take the crew through the outer solar system, an area of space that's relatively unexplored and completely unexplored by humans. The crew would likely pass by several of the outer planets and their moons, including, if we were lucky, possibly even 2 or 3 of the outer worlds of Uranus, Saturn and Jupiter, depending on their positions at the time, and indeed their respective moons. The crew would also have the opportunity to study the outer planets and their moons in detail. Uranus, for example, has extreme seasons and weather patterns that are not found anywhere else in the solar system. Once the crew reaches Neptune, they would have the opportunity to study the planet in detail, probably using the large moon of Triton as initial base site. Neptune, known for its high winds that can surpass 1300 miles per hour and large storms, is 58 times bigger and 17 times heavier than Earth, and has many mysteries that our crew could begin to study. Event Horizon, of course, was a 90s classic, and if anyone is interested in a bit of 90s nostalgia, the What's Next channel has reviewed recently both the 90s Outer Limits series and the X-Files pilot episodes, so it's well worth a watch, and I'll link it in the card above. A manned mission to the blue planet of Neptune is fraught with many dangers, from cosmic radiation to solar wind and bullet-like micrometeorites. It could take decades, and there would be a high likelihood of the crew never returning. At some point in our futures, we will have to seriously consider a trip out to this blue world. For now, however, struggling as we are just to colonise our moon, I think we'll have to put Neptune down the list of possibilities, and hope maybe one day we'll be able to call it home. Thanks for watching, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. If you'd like to support the channel further, you could consider buying me a coffee, and I'll link this in the description. Thanks to those of you who have already done so, and if you have any videos or subjects that you'd like to see brought to life, don't forget to let me know in the comments below, and it could just be your idea next week that shows up. Take really good care of yourselves, look after your friends and family well, and I'll see you on the next one.